This is the Jedburg Podcast. I'm the creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Each episode, I speak with transformative leaders, visionaries, drivers of change, and those dedicated to winning, no matter the challenge. The Jedburg Podcast is founded in the lineage of the Special Operations Jedburgh teams of the past and is produced in partnership with Talent War Group, a management consulting and executive search firm focused on helping you optimize the people side of your business. We're sponsored by Jersey Mike's Subs. Together, we share the mission of giving, making a difference in someone's life. Visit the Jedburg Podcast, Talent War Group, and Jersey Mike's Subs on the web and on social media. A percentage of all proceeds is dedicated to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. Functional fitness is key to optimal performance. In the Army, we called it train as you fight. General George Patton famously said, "You fight as you train." On the Jedburg Podcast, we say, how you prepare today determines success tomorrow. Sarah Apgar found the gap between the way firefighters trained and the way they fought fires. To fill this gap, she created the FitFighter Steel Hose, a strength and conditioning system made from real fire hose and steel shot, and designed to bring a full-body workout to anyone looking to improve their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. FitFighter was born during Sarah's commitment to serve as a volunteer firefighter after leading soldiers in the Army Corps of Engineers. An All-American Rugby Player turned Iraq War veteran, Sarah took her idea for FitFighter to Shark Tank, where she impressed all the sharks and landed a partnership with Daniel Lubetzsky, the founder of Kind Snacks. Sarah invited me to her Long Island studio and manufacturing center for a conversation on entrepreneurism, the fitness industry, her 2-minute uninterrupted pitch to the sharks, and how leadership in the Army set her up for the highs and lows of building her own business. Sarah and I also talk identity and the need to surround ourselves with groups of people who bring us up and make us better versions of ourselves. Sarah is an impressive athlete, innovator, founder, CEO, mother, and spouse who, once our conversation finished, challenged me to grab a steel hose and train as she fights. Welcome to the Jedburgh Podcast.
Thanks. It's awesome to be here.
We are in the FitFighter gym. We're outside of New York City on Long Island in Port Washington. It is like, 20-something degrees outside and about 40-something degrees inside. But I so appreciate you having us here. This is so exciting. The product is awesome. I told you before we started that I watched the Shark Tank episode last night. I watched so many other videos of you giving the classes, and now to be here in the gym, in where you originally started creating the product after your garage. So awesome to meet you. Thank you for hosting us.
You're welcome, and thank you for coming all the way down here. It's very special for me to have visitors. It doesn't happen often, especially post-COVID, so this is great for me.
Well, this is the first of a series of fitness-related episodes that we're going to do over the next couple of weeks, and I think I was telling you we're doing a partnership with GoRuck, another veteran-owned organization based on fitness, and there's an event in Jacksonville in April called Sandlot Jacks, and so we're running a bunch of fitness-related episodes running up to that. This is the first one, but you are so inspirational. I told you I watched the videos last night. I sent it to like 5 people after I watched the Shark Tank episode. I sent it to my wife, and she was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! Like, you must be so excited." And I really am, because not only are you the founder and CEO of FitFighter, but you're an Iraq War vet. You were a women's rugby All-American at Princeton. You have an MBA from Dartmouth. You're a volunteer firefighter. You're the spouse of a veteran, mother of 2 girls. There's so many places that we can start this conversation. But I figure, since we're in the gym, since eventually, when we get done with this episode, we're going to do a workout. We're going to put it all over our social media and on YouTube, and everyone's going to watch me get smoked by you. Right? We're going to start with FitFighter.
Okay.
So, talk to me for a second about FitFighter. What is it? Why is it different? You said that it is one of the most, if not the most, versatile and durable fitness products on the market. It's a free weight and a resistance tool. It's a complete total body fitness program.
Right. So the coolest thing about the FitFighter story is that this was never intended to be a major fitness brand. I did never intend to launch a commercial product into the fitness industry, and now sort of fast forward, to have this incredible mainstream adoption. This started in my garage in a small volunteer firehouse on Long Island. I joined the volunteer firehouse to just get back some of the camaraderie that I missed from military days, which I'm sure resonates a lot with you too, and a lot of our listeners. And I noticed that there was this big chasm between the training that we were doing in the gym or in the truck bays and what was really happening out there in the fire ground. So originally designed the Steel Hose, our signature product, as a way to train hose handling skills, grip strength, understanding of trunk stability and work capacity for firefighters. And never imagined what this could become. And that's what's so neat about the story. I started over a couple of years' time as this garage hobby grew into a training program that we could scale to other Long Island firehouses and ultimately the FDNY Fire Academy. Had coaches and personal trainers and other fitness professionals come to me and sort of knock on our door and say, hey, we've noticed what you're doing in this tactical setting, and it seems like something could really benefit our clients and members too. From cradle to grave, I like to say age 8 to 80, we can make you strong throughout your entire life. And so it's really snowballed into something that was so compelling to me that I thought, this is now or never. My youngest daughter was 18 months when I launched the company, and left, dream job at Warby Parker, which I'm sure we'll chat about later, and just thought I was so compelled by the idea that we had stumbled upon something inspired by service members that was so broad and so versatile, that could have these incredible applications for people, young, old, and in between, to keep them strong, to connect them to weightlifting, which is something that's something that's been quite niche and is not accessible to most of the population. So that's FitFighter in a nutshell. And I'm just I sort of sit back and sometimes pinch myself that now I'm sort of living this dream of waking up every day and having a chance, an opportunity to live out a vision and have an impact that's so broad-based.
So the Steel Hose itself, right? This is about functional fitness. Right. And when you identified this gap that you talked about, you said that traditionally I can imagine that firefighters would train like we train in the military. You go to the gym, you lift weights, you do bench press, you do some squats, and then you assume that that's going to translate over into whatever your world is. We call it functional fitness, right? When special operations made the transition from 3 sets of 10 on the bench press and the squat rack to more of a dynamic full body, what they call a total warrior, combined with a total athlete kind of concept. You've taken this now into firefighting, essentially saying that the hose is the primary tool that has to be used, and then once that hose is loaded with the water, right now it creates all these other effects on your body that you have to train. So talk about the construction of the product, and as you had to build that first V1, I'm always interested in version 1 of products, because as you go through the iteration, it's always so interesting to see how entrepreneurs make it better and better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna grab a hose.
All right.
Should have done that in the beginning. This is actually our ESPN hose. So originally the very first steel hose ever was a piece of real fire hose, and I know we'll have some be able to see some of the used hose. It's actually a new piece of hose. It was just taken right off the trucks, and I started to fill it with all kinds of different materials, pebbles, dirt, sand, just whatever garbage I found in the firehouse. And so the first thing was very clunky, and we'll show some pictures of it. It's about 20 feet long. We put a hose clamp on the end of it with an eye hook. Or sort of one of those little like an eye hook that we could then drag resistance behind it. And the entire goal, as you've just stated, the very first application of this was literally mimic charged hose, which we didn't get to handle nearly enough, and yet it's the lifeline of the fire ground. And this is the thing that matters, right? In fact, there's an entire movement now called nozzle first. Just get the hose in the door, because ultimately that is what is the life-saving, lifeblood of our work. And so we'd go out to the truck bay and into the back of the firehouse, and we would drag these hoses around, and we would train, and we'd start talking about body position, being very efficient with our movement. We'd talk about grip strength. We'd talk about how holding weight in closer to the body, holding the hose into the body allows us to use our strongest parts of our body for the movements, rather than using our upper body, which is always the inclination of sort of all of us first, because we think like, oh, we need to move our arms, to move the hose. And that's, of course, as we know in industry, in the fitness industry, strength and conditioning world, not the way we move something efficiently. It's use the trunk, glutes, your hips.
The big muscles.
The big muscles. And so, what happened was over time, I started to just refine, like I'm an inventor. I'm like stubbornly curious. I'm someone who, like, if there's something that seems good, we need to make it 15 times better, because there must be a way. And so I started to, in fact, I will go grab also, I have a box of all these filler materials, about 20 filler materials. And I found the Steel Shot, among lots of others. The Steel Shot's about a 1 millimeter, perfectly round steel ball. It's double recycled from the original sandblasting media. It's used in construction. And it can't be used again for construction. And so I thought, gosh, well, this is interesting, because this substance is 5 times denser than water. It flows like water. It's twice as dense as sand, but it doesn't kink like sand. So it had the perfect qualities as this filler material. And we started to realize the synthetic rubber that lines real fire hose, when you compact it, you started to compact this material inside of it, created this really beautiful form factor. It's semi-firm, it's never kinks, it always holds its shape, but there's no hard steel. And so we started to think, like, gosh, this really does feel the most like we've sort of arrived at yet as a charged fire hose. And so suddenly I feel like we had the perfect way to train firefighters, for the extraordinary demands of that movement. And then, as you can see, the modern day steel hose sort of took that same construction as we started with. But I have a friend who worked in a canvas shop making sails, and he said, well, I can pound grommet. We have this hydraulic grommet machine. Let's pound a grommet in there. We said, well, we really got to use this very heavy duty 258 nylon gauge thread and double stitch it so it'd be very durable. That's the thread that's used for like horse saddles and leather boots. So this is our machines are very, very strong. And then we just put the end caps in the end, mostly decorative, came up with that sort of proprietary compaction, and that's the modern day steel hose, still from that real hose, which of course now with our volume that we have, we do get some of it new. So that's it still maintains the simplicity and beauty that we started with, just refined over now 7 years of time, by the way. People see Shark Tank and they think like, oh man, that's what an overnight success. 7 years overnight.
Yeah, it's overnight in terms of a lifetime, but in the last 7 years has certainly been a lot of ups and downs. Now, though, you mentioned production has scaled, and so we said, and we joked, it started in your garage, it moved into this space here, just on the other side of this wall, and now you have a partnership with Sorinex Fitness, which is one of the leading fitness equipment manufacturers. How has that changed the business?
Launching with Sorinex was a complete game changer for 2 reasons. Number one, we had a partner that, as you said, is known as, and I said this on Shark Tank, Sorinex to me was always the gold standard, made in the USA, the best strength and conditioning fitness equipment company, arguably in the world, certainly this country. And so from a standpoint of quality and a partnership around innovating in this industry, I couldn't think of a better partner. And the second thing was just the sheer scale, and the management of what had become for me, the space we're sitting in right here used to be my factory, and I found myself all of a sudden drowning in not only launching a fitness brand, but also, running a manufacturing facility. You can imagine during COVID-19 especially, we had this thing buzzing, suddenly we just started, and all of a sudden we had to be socially distanced and pulling in raw materials and everything from the production to the accounting around doing that. I was way in over my head. And so Sorinex, became a willing partner through a good friend and partner of FitFighter, Jason Walsh, who's a good friend of Bert Sorens, who's the president of the company. And, they introduced us, and for them, I think it was a great fit too, because, Sorinex says, and this is a unique product for them. They have obviously largely professional clientele, professional teams, a lot of collegiate facilities, universities, high schools. And so it's setting up big rack systems, which with very diverse tools in them as well. But the steel hose is something that's quite different from most of what Sorinex makes. And so I think in that way for them, it seemed like there's great synergy there.
It's funny that you just brought up a really important point about the entrepreneurial path, right? Identifying what you're good at. And we've had a lot of these conversations in prior episodes. The one that comes to mind when you were telling that story is Seth Goldman. Seth Goldman is the founder of Honest Tea. Now he's the chairman of the board of Beyond Meat. And in his book, and in the conversation I had with him, I asked him about when they went and they bought a manufacturing facility. And he laughs when I bring it up because he's like, oh yeah, we lost like millions of dollars because we realized we had no idea how to actually manufacture the product. We were really good at sales, we were really good at the design, we knew what we wanted, but we had to focus on our strength, and we went down this path for too long. And it's great to hear your story because you're saying kind of, we realized early on, you know, that we really aren't the manufacturer who will be able to scale this, let's bring a partner in. And I think that that point of differentiation is what sets a lot of successful entrepreneurs apart from those who kind of keep hammering, saying, I can do it, and then they don't get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been that, you know, because we've had such a condensed version of growth across, you know, in a lot of different markets very quickly, just because of the world order surrounding this company and just the general entrepreneurial path and early state, you know, in the first couple of years. And there have been a lot of points at which I'm facing, you know, that same question, you know, what are you, and I think there's a question in who you are as a leader and as a CEO, you know, as a founder, a leader, and a CEO. And I think then there's a question about, you know, the business and the company and what its value proposition is, you know, what its fundamental core competency is, you know, as a company. And for us, that is, you know, creating, you know, disruptive and game-changing products, equipment, training and education in our industry. Definitely not manufacturing. You know, content creation is something that I think about having, you know, really wanting to bring in just, you know, better partners, new partners. That is not something intrinsically strong for me, but so important.
Join the club, I'm with you.
I mean, you guys are crushing it. I know, I feel like we're crushing it here. It's like, yeah, this is super pro. So like, so those, that I 100% agree with you that like that, you might think that's an easy thing if you found a company like, well, yeah, of course, you know your core competency, but you can quickly get distracted, not in a bad way, but in a way where, you know, there are lots of elements of the business that you need to figure out how to grow and scale and manage and operate. And there's no one right answer how to do that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about scale. So early 2020, you know, late 2019, early 2020, you realize I got to scale this thing. In order to do that, I need a partner. We talk about teamsmanship, you know, and team ability on the podcast all the time. But you launched this company with $210,000 of what you call friend and family money, $50,000 of your own money, and then you went on Shark Tank. You asked initially when you went on at the beginning of the show, $250,000 for 15%, so you valued the business at $1.6 million. Why Shark Tank? What was going on with other potential investment opportunities or conversations that led you to say, I'm going to apply and try to get on Shark Tank?
Yeah, so the Shark Tank story is really unique to this company in particular because we had launched in 2019, just to make sure that everyone sort of knows the timeline, as very strictly as a business that intended to grow within the professional sector. So my original strategy in launching to the commercial market, especially with our tactical roots, was that we were going to work with channel partners, the personal trainers, coaches, gyms, and public sector, and ensure that the steel hose and the instability resistance training, IRT, which is this well-researched, you know, element of what we do best with our equipment, is something that is seated at the very top of the industry. You know, my long-term vision, as you know, is to completely reframe the way that we think about lifting weight, and bring it to a huge, more than 90% of the population that don't. This is, to take a quick diversion, you know, weightlifting in general is the single most important practice for our long-term health, period, hands down, every day of the week and twice on Sundays. People don't know that because we've sort of like brainwashed them into cardio. We can talk more about this.
You gotta run every day.
So we can talk more about that later. But the point is, as a practice, it's so well researched, and yet 95% of the population doesn't do it. For me, this is like brushing our teeth. Like if 95% of people didn't brush our teeth, we would all think that we were like in World War III. And yet, this is the same thing. So that's quick diversion, but sort of pulling it back in. So it was very important to me that this not risk being something in our industry, which happens all the time, which is that sort of fad fitness. Oh, you come up with a new product, that's interesting, you can do a few things with.
The 3-minute apps.
You know, that's right.
It's better than the 4-minute apps.
That's right. Or whatever the sort of gadget is that like is the next new thing. It's very important to me this was enduring and game-changing, long-term shift. And so then when COVID-19 hit and that market all but shut down, the survival of the business depended on really being able to understand where we could impact, the home fitness market and just support that current world order of fitness that we had. And so Shark Tank was really an outgrowth of that pivot in March of 2020, where in May, the end of May, I got this phone call from the Shark Tank executive producers. It was a few months into our time sort of putting up Instagram lives, and I developed a home gym set, to be at a price point that was better for folks at home. And we were sort of now focusing on the safety aspects of our product, safety and storage aspects of the product at home. And so this was a way to, number one, keep the lights on, because let's be honest, I'm not sugarcoating anything about 2020. That was tough for a lot of people. It was tough for us too. Yes, we're in fitness, but I had no brand awareness yet.
Right.
It was me against, every other sort of, fitness professional and product that had gone online, was swimming upstream on Instagram.
Yeah, it's a super competitive space.
It's so competitive, and I think if you don't have that brand awareness and the product education yet, it was tricky. So, fast forward over the next few, so I get this phone call, I'm thrilled because I knew this would be something that could really leverage our strengths. We had something really interesting. It was pretty early on still, so I was a little bit concerned about that. But, gave me an opportunity to walk out on stage, and I felt like when I thought about it, I was like, what sort of possible loss could we have from this if this is an opportunity to walk out, tell people about something that I really believe passionately in is going to change the world, and tell 5 million people on national TV, what that is. And you get your 2 minutes. You get your 2 minutes without interruption at the beginning, right? Right. So, at the very least, you can have 2 minutes, and then if you just get, tomatoed off the stage and sort of like bashed and burned until like after that, still, it's like, okay, I'm going to have those 2 minutes. So I focused on that. And I felt like Shark Tank was perfect for us. Great for me, as a founder, tell our story. Good for veterans, right? For people to see veteran-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, parents and moms out there. And I thought that this, net, I hope will walk away as being a good thing, and it was.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you get out there, right? You get the word out. But yeah. it was a good thing. And so I will talk a little bit about the episode, because it was really interesting to watch the different perspectives of the different sharks. But bottom line up front, you got the investment from Daniel Lubetzsky, who's the founder of Kind Health Snacks, just a small company, right? But he did 25%, $250,000. I appreciated your counter offer. I thought that was awesome. I think everybody in the room thought it was. You got to throw it out there.
Yeah.
But talk about that decision. We have brought up investment decisions in a few episodes. Jersey Mike's founder, Peter Cancro. Shout out to our sponsor, Jersey Mike's. But Peter, his story is one, I think, the most influential when it comes to having to take an investment, because he has actually spent his entire career not taking an investment. And he always said, if I have this vision and I believe I don't need anything to do it, he started with a single sandwich shop. You had the opportunity, you saw it, when you were standing there, and now you have to decide. Now it's the moment of truth. This is everything to do it. What made you decide ultimately? Yes, I'm going to bring him in. We're going to make it happen.
Yeah, what's interesting is that for me, this decision was actually completely agnostic of the capital itself. What I mean by that is, I had decided, up until that point, and still now, FitFighter has been built by bringing great people and advisors and professionals and influential, team members around the table and close into my inner circle and helping me to grow this, because I became pretty clear, I think when we're when you have a military background and very early on in your professional career, you've had to stare in the face like your strengths and your limitations as a leader, and you've had like these experiences at a very young age where you sort of learn about, you know, what you're good at, you know, where you're going to shine. Pretty early on, like I decided for myself that, you know, I don't actually think I have, you know, when it comes to being the CEO of a you know, brand new business and building a business, there are a lot of aspects of business, you know, that definitely are not unintuitive for me, but just like, you know, don't have a ton of experience with and don't necessarily feel as confident with. And so very early on made a decision that I'm going to bring people in, whether it's as an advisor or an internal employee, you know, just to sort of surround myself with this army of people. It's going to grow this business together. Like I'll be the visionary and I'll stand out in front. But this is going to be a company that is grown by great people. And that to me was, you know, Shark Tank provided this opportunity to have any one of those extraordinary people who really did have both the business chops, but clearly also just like a really, you know, really powerful strategic positioning and, you know, influential, you know, folks who could join this business and be partners for me, any one of them. And so when I walked in there, the decision that I made was I did a lot of research about this specific environment of Shark Tank, and you know, $289K is the average investment that a Shark Tank ends up closing on Shark Tank, you know, on the in the show. You know, I knew that fitness was actually a smaller percent than people probably think of products. So 10% of products that are given deals are fitness products. And so I was armed with quite a bit of research and homework that I'd done ahead of time to position myself, you know, in a way that would set me up for success from the terms of kind of the deal terms. And then I decided that no matter what, unless it was just egregiously unfair or totally out of left field, right, you know, I'm going to buy the company, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Which has happened,
which is, you know, crazy, but happens. I had decided that if offered an opportunity for a partner from any one of the sharks, that I would walk out of there with it. Yeah. It's just the decision that I made. I made it before I went in. And so actually that moment where I countered, you know, we had the quick offer and I countered, and then he said, like, you know, it was really easy for me. Like I had just this like very strong conviction that I had thought it through, and like at that moment I was cool with it. And like, yeah, it's a terrible way to raise capital. Like I got to give up a huge right. portion of my company, right, for this and close the deal. I mean, some, you know, and then like that is just a decision I was very, very comfortable with because I had really thought that through ahead of time. So a lot of people are surprised by that, and I get questioned all the time about like, wow, you know, giving up so a portion of your company. But the bottom line is like, look at the partner that I brought on board, and at the end of the day, you know, $1 billion brand. You know, that's down the road, you know, that's plenty of the company left over.
And the mentorship. You know, that's kind of my right. next question.
Yeah.
And for the record, if any of the sharks wanted to invest in the Jedburg Podcast, I'd make the same decision that you did. So I agree with that decision. I would go into that conversation with the same mentality that unless it's crazy, I'm in on this thing. So I totally get it. What have you learned about just business, entrepreneurism from your partnership with Daniel?
Daniel is a founder first. That's one of the things I learned early on because it's very recent that he sold kind, you know, to Mars, and you know that exit happened. He's now, of course, still involved in the chairman, and so that his mentorship, I think, more even than someone who's been, you know, an investor and had a very, very large, you know, portfolio of companies, I think has been especially unique for me. Because he's constantly referencing his very vivid memory of being like exactly in my shoes.
Yeah, wasn't that long ago?
It wasn't that long ago. And his book, if you haven't read his book, a plug for Daniel's book, like his story, you know, that he tells in there, it really is. I mean, it's as entrepreneurial as it gets. I mean, he's a Mexican-American immigrant, completely self-made person, tells great stories about trudging the streets of New York City with granola bars, you know, in the early days. And it makes you feel, again, like we have a lot in common. Whereas like a lot, you know, with billionaire mentors, you know, sometimes that's challenging, you know, when you're sitting at the other side of the sort of other end of the road, so to speak. And so I would say that Daniel has really shared, 3 things with me as a mentor that have been extremely impactful. The first thing is that we talked a lot about that early entrepreneurial opportunistic stage, where he had actually published a great article recently about mackerels and minnows, and it's we talk about the balance between strategic direction in a business and focus. Something came up on Shark Tank,
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you about
and also, just a teaser. And then also being opportunistic. And he's emphasized the point to me and the support for both of those and the importance of that balance. Because if you're not opportunistic, this entire company has been built on opportunism, and if you're not, then you may miss what ends up being a core part of the strategy going forward. And so that's probably number 1. Number 2 has just been around the self-care and the importance of relationships and mentors, and really taking care of yourself as a founder, and because you're working so hard, taking the time for your relationships and taking it slow and not feeling like you need to be like, some crazy pill popping 18-hour-a-day sort of, coffee drinking.
That's
entrepreneur.
only 18 hours. There's 24 hours.
That's
in the day.
great. Like, why are you
leaving
ever
6
stopping?
on the table?
Yeah. And as a parent, as you know too, like I really appreciate that. I mean, I can't do that. I have to be with my girls and want to, for 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and that's otherwise that maybe if I was 23 and entrepreneur without that I wouldn't. And so that's been the second big thing. And then the third big thing is a lot about the, he has a perspective on investment and fundraising that has been powerful for me. He grew Kind to a $13 million company before he took meaningful investment on. And I took investment dollars on much earlier. And because I needed to, but we've talked about philosophically and practically speaking, we've talked a lot about that, and I value his continued mentorship in both of those 3 areas.
I like those 3. We're gonna note to create a marketing asset around those 3. I think those are really insightful. Be opportunistic, the self-care, the building of relationships and mentors, and then the fundraising aspect. I really like that. So you mentioned what I'll call the 2 schools of thought that have come up about business in general. Let's say business in general, and they were highlighted in your conversation with the various sharks. But one perspective, and certainly this was of Mr. Mark Cuban, was that you have to pick one thing. You have to focus on one thing. I've been told that a million times. Focus on one thing, do it really well. And then the other side of that is identify opportunity, seize opportunity, find a way to make it happen, build a team. If you have 3 or 4 opportunities, then build 3 or 4 teams, and you can manage them. Look at somebody like Elon Musk. Who, and I use that example all the time. I mean, here's a guy who's involved in 10, 15 different things. He's had 100 that have failed, but the ones that have scaled are incredible. And he doesn't go in every day to the Tesla office and say, I'm building a car today, or Starlink or the Hyperloop or any of these initiatives. But that's the other side of this. When you look at business in general, you certainly using FitFighter as an example, but business in general, where's the line between being spread too thin, but then also being opportunistic?
Yeah, so I'll like to answer this with a couple stories, because I think they underscore what my approach has been. Because this is a constant push-pull for me, and I will tell you that I wholeheartedly reject the idea, and there's plenty of examples recently in the industry of the challenge or not necessarily of being the North Star to pick one single core market and go after that, especially in the fitness industry, because it changes so fast. Research moves very quickly. Our need to support people in all kinds of different ways changes, and so I wholeheartedly reject the idea that early on in a company that the only way is to sort of pick that sort of one path and trajectory and then do that really well, for 5 years and then pick a new one. I think that could work for some companies, and for FitFighter, I do not believe that would be a strategy that would have helped us to really understand our value proposition, both near term and long term. So first story, simple story is, around this pivot into home fitness that was forced, not something that we originally had intended, really accelerated probably 3 to 5 years my intent to be playing ball at all in the consumer market and handing people hoses in their living rooms. That was not my intent. But when we did that, we started to have people write into us and say things like, wow, I've never been able to pick up a free weight because I was intimidated and it's so hard for my grip. I'm a 55 plus person with arthritis, or a veteran with nerve damage, or a mom that has toddlers running around. And so we started to learn about how important some of the physical product features of the form factor were for people. I always knew this was a great grip strength tool because what we were doing in the firehouse, but I had no idea how compelling the safety of the form and the grip of this form factor and the structure of the product itself, how impactful that was going to be on a huge, on the consumer, home fitness market. And, those 5 million people and ultimately 10,000 customers overnight that all put hoses in their living rooms, after Shark Tank, that became one of the single, biggest pieces of feedback that we got was, thank you for introducing something that's so simple and so impactful and has allowed me to do something for the first time that I know is important to do. I never would have had that feedback in that way, the strength of that feedback. Now we're able to really leverage that in the professional environment as well, in the gym environment. We have a huge, I think physical therapy in high schools are two just enormous opportunity, total white space for us that I'm not going after now in 2022. That's not my focus, but absolutely is my focus, 3 to 5 year focus once we really seeded this with gyms and coaches and trainers. And those two markets probably would not have emerged early on as having, being in my windshield, on the horizon, and thinking that through if I hadn't had that feedback from the home fitness, the consumer community. So that's just one thing. And then, and then a second story would be, just in group fitness and team training. So, same thing, like I never, there's an argument to the fact that kind of the group fitness environment, it's very sort of cardio based, boot camps. And I sort of dabbled a little bit early on in, coming up with some just really fun models for, short group sort of team training. And that's become one of our biggest markets too, because we realized you could just hand people a hose. You can hand 50 people a hose and have them go out into a parking lot, a lot of the way we did in the firehouse or the fire academy, and have them, very safely and effectively being trained in large volume. So this has been something that for group fitness instructors has been so impactful. And so these ways in which just constantly testing, iterating, learning, rejecting, I think you do have to be diligent about reject, okay, absorb, pull that one in, okay, stay focused for sure. Shiny objects are tricky as an entrepreneur, but it's been a critical part, I think, of our business and really deeply understanding our value proposition for something that is truly an innovation.
Well, for the record, because I want to make sure that I'm clear, I agreed with you. When I listened to your pitch, I'm like, wow, she's briefed 5 or 6 different sales verticals. It seems super squared away. She's got it figured out. And then they're like, oh, you're all over the place. I'm like, no. So, right decision.
Support, Fran. Appreciate it.
I live it every day, so I'm with you.
Yeah.
I want to talk about you for a little bit. Where you come from, your background. We mentioned that you did your undergrad at Princeton. You were an All-American on the women's rugby team. I spend a lot of time with college athletes. I work also as the performance development coach for Boston University men's rowing, the physical and the mental aspect of the sport. Collegiate athletics, for me at least, I believe set the foundation for so many things that I've done since. And people ask me all the time, how hard was selection? You were a Green Beret. And I was like, every day I was at selection, I was glad I wasn't rowing. Because that was the hardest thing. And that was what set me apart, I believe, from so many others. We had the opportunity in previous episodes to speak with Kristen Holmes, also a Princeton alum on the coaching side. She was 13 years as the head field hockey coach for at Princeton. 12 Ivy League championships, 1 national championship. Jevy Stone, another prior episode, winningest ever in the women's single on the head of the Charles, Olympic silver medalist from the Rio Games. We had her on as well in the fall. Princeton alum. When you look back at your time there in collegiate athletics, how did that prepare you when you achieved and operated at such a high level in that sport to go into the military? You joined ROTC. So talk to me a little bit about collegiate sports, what you learned, and then why you decided to go into ROTC at the back end of that.
Yeah, sure. So the ROTC decision is something you sort of have to commit at least to the year early on your senior year in high school, and that definitely just.
I'm an OCS guy, so
yeah,
I did sports, and then I was like, this Army thinks he's pretty good. I don't have to go to Maine and be a journalist. That's what you're saying. I can go make the news. Yeah, let's go do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, there's paths, there's OCS, ROTC, and then of course the academies for those listening, for who are non-military. And so, for me, ROTC was you commit for at least that first year of college, in high school, and that definitely was a decision that was born out of what I had learned, characteristics I learned that I loved in high school sports for sure. And I think the combination of being, in ROTC and sort of considering the notion of military training and leadership and that profession after school was absolutely 100% influenced by collegiate athletics. And so I totally agree with you. I mean, I am a huge proponent and supporter of, and will, as soon as I can, spend more time on, every kid who's growing up and every teenager having that opportunity to play team sports, to play, on teams, individual sports, just get that foundation. I mean, we've got to figure out ways to make sure that we're not having, kids start to drop out because they're not serious enough and they're not on a travel team, right, as all this. So anyway, we could have a whole another podcast on that. So I'll save more of my sort of waxing poetic there. But on collegiate athletics, you have this incredible, there's two things I think about collegiate athletics that strike me as being just totally foundational and very preparatory, I think, for a tactical professional career. And the first one is just that sheer feeling of what it's like in the team huddle. Like, you remember before a game, even before a practice or scrimmage or whatever, but certainly before a game and at halftime and after a game, if it was a rough one, or in a victory lap, if it was, with your team, there's nothing like that feeling of the team huddle. There's just, okay, it's cold in here anyway, but if you could see me that I didn't already have goosebumps, it really is cold. I'm freezing, Fran, while we're doing this podcast, just so everyone knows. But the goosebumps really got bigger because I was for a second, I was imagining myself in that team huddle and just thinking how great that feels. And then you run out on the field and you just have this sense that everybody's in it together, And it's just, and that's the feeling, that mission orientation of the military, as for me, is just something that was a direct sort of outgrowth, feeling wow, this is a profession in which I can get, have that sort of same sensitivity. And then the other thing I think is just reactionary, is much more technical. I mean, for me, as a rugby player, I think learning skills, learning technique, refining technique over and over again. We used to always say that we do a skill in gymnastics, we do a skill 500 times before we're really ready to compete it, in competition. I always felt that way on the field too, catching high-speed tackling, catching a ball and kick, the reaction you have. I mean, you're seeing me right, you can relive this stuff so quickly.
They don't call it the glory days for
nothing, I know, exactly. So it just comes back to you and you realize how special that is to be constantly every day in practice, learning, iterating on your skills, perfecting something. And I yearn for that every day, in now in my professional world. And I think in the Army, it was absolutely felt sort of that same way. That was this perfect corollary, and just carried those two kind of core things, many other themes, of course, as well. But those two core things, I feel just translate just directly and perfect and intimately into that professional career.
Well, you went into the Army so you graduated ROTC, you go into the Army, you're 23, you went to Fort Carson, so we shared that. Right, we were both there at the exact same time, which I think is awesome. It's by far the absolute best post in the U.S. Army.
100%.
And everybody, I don't know if it was for you, but so I was an infantry officer before I went and became a Green right? And everyone's like, where do you want to go? You have to go to the 101st or the 82nd. And I'm from Boston, right? And so it's like, wait a second, you want me to go to like Kentucky or North Carolina?
Yeah, that's right.
That's insane.
Yeah.
There's a place in Colorado. And they're like, yes, but it's a mechanized infantry. And I'm like, that sounds great. I guess I live in Colorado, no problem at all. Hands down the best post.
Yeah.
But you were there, 23, you go to Iraq in the early days. I think we were there at the exact same time. We talked about that. What did that experience, being an officer in the Army, leading soldiers, teach you about? Number one, I'll kind of throw out business, but really leading and having to craft and build and motivate an organization. But then also, what did it teach you about perspective? Because I asked that question because when you're an entrepreneur, it's easy to do what we call pour gasoline on your head, play with the match, run around, the world is on fire, begin to lose perspective of the big picture. What the military does, I believe, is puts you in these situations, especially as a leader, where you're constantly having to evaluate perspective. What did you take away from your experience there that set you up to be a better leader in the corporate world or the private sector?
Yeah. So I talked in the Shark Tank episode about the one soldier who was directly under, in my platoon, directly under my command, who was lost his life when we were in Iraq at December 16th of 2003. And I would say that, like, starting with that pinnacle moment for me, and kind of remembering, speaking of like the vividness of those kinds of moments, starting with that moment and then sort of thinking about everything else that surrounds it when you're like in this environment, working with young soldiers, towards this, ultimately this shared mission, immediately post the combat operations ending, in this brand new, theater of war, in Iraq. That was like the early days. I mean, it was my platoon on the ground, but I wasn't there yet because I joined my platoon in September of that year, and they had been that summer paving Route Tampa all the way up, from Kuwait City all the way up to Kurdistan. And so I joined them. Here they are, the ones that have sort of paved the way. And so, I think back to there's no experience or day in life now that just even comes close to just, I think, the depth of your human experience and your team experience and relationships, than those experiences that we have on those kinds of missions and in the military. And I think that gives you, to your point, it gives you a grounding, I think, just day to day that I try to keep in mind no matter what happens. If FitFighter were to go up in a puff of smoke tomorrow, would I be a person, would I still be me? Would I be a happy person? Would I be a proud mom? Would I sort of what is that bigger picture, and it gives me this great sense of peace and confidence in when you make mistakes and you screw things up and shit hits the fan all the time every day, and you go through these big roller coasters and you're problem solving, and it's but there's this layer over top, I think, of kind of grounding and peace and love and mission orientation. That's something I've never felt outside of those moments, deployed and with your team and when Nathan passed away. And so I think that's something that's that perspective is, I think, extremely important. I think it drives everything from your approach to your personal leadership and day-to-day posture to your business strategy. I mean, I actually think that thinking about how you grow a company can be founded on some of those things. Are you always seeking, faster, better, crazier, whatever, or and maybe you are at some points, and then are you sort of like pulling back at other points, and like just, those, it has this like very, very reverberating effect, I think, into lots and lots of areas of like entrepreneurship and business. I think if you've had this like those foundational experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we talk about it in every episode, in the 9 characteristics used by special operations to recruit, assess, select, and evaluate talent are some of our foundations of our conversations in our podcast. And I think you take so much away, in the military and also sports. I mean, I mentioned Jerry Stone, and Jerry Stone said, hard things bond you better, much more than easy things. It was close to the exact quote, but she talked about that, and the military really does that. When you get out of the military, it's something you've been vocal about, something we've had some conversations about. There is something that you lose that's much more than your rank and your stature, your position, or you lose camaraderie, you lose your team. I've spoken about it before, but the hardest day of my life to this day is when I had to look in the rearview mirror and leave Fort Carson and realize that I've handed my ID badge in for the last time, and all my friends, everything I know is now in the past, and I don't know what's ahead of me. And you have to now figure out, well, who's my group? Who's people call it a tribe? Who's my tribe? Who are going to be the people that I identify with? Because so much of it is unknown. For you found the fire department. What drew you to the fire department, and why did you make that switch so quickly?
Yeah, I didn't know I could never have imagined how hard that was, that transition out of the Army, like into, sort of this deer in the headlights. Like, wow, here I am in like the great big world that feels like it's lacking that same just like sense of, that lifestyle and like that sense of mission and team, and that you sort of know what you're about, what you're doing every day and why. And it was really a hard transition. And when we moved to Long Island for the first time, which is ultimately for graduate school, I just was feeling like it was also a move that then sort of like thrust me out of any, place of comfort in terms of like home or like a school environment. I was looking for a job out of Tuck, and so wasn't in a place where I had like any kind of community or family, much less the military lifestyle. And so I think it was like a very stark moment for me in feeling like, when I was roughly 30 or so, where all of a sudden I felt like I had sort of backtracked. My first like 5, 6, 7 years had, out of college had been this incredibly rich experience that very much mirrored the richness of your collegiate experience and what we talked about. And then I felt like I was sort of like just, kind of staring at a wall. And so I saw an advertisement for an open house, like a sign, at the local firehouse on Long Island. People don't realize that Long Island is supported 100% by volunteer firefighters. There's like 8 million people who are serviced by a volunteer population.
I didn't know that.
It's incredible. There's no other place in the country that's like it. This super dense population outside of New York City. And every single firefighter and fire department is 100% volunteer. It's crazy. And so I thought, wow, that's really unique. And I thought, I really, that feels like something that maybe I could sink my teeth into. I love the physical training, give me a little bit of that camaraderie and community back. And I was totally right. I wandered in to the open house. I chatted with the chief. Totally different dynamic. I mean, it's all its own, right? Like, firefighters and public safety, different world, different animal, different training, but nonetheless, like just so, but that like service orientation is ultimately what connects people who choose that path, whether it's volunteer or professional. And so I immediately took to it. I loved Firefighter 1. I loved the training. I felt comfortable, right? Like kind of like breathe a sigh of relief, like, oh yeah, this is what it's like to like train and learn again. And those skill sets I was talking about, like learn a new skill as an adult. And so I really found that filled a real void for me, and still does. I'm not, to be clear, like I'm on a leave of absence right now. I've got 2 little kids and a growing company and a lot of chaos. So I'm rarely, involved in the volunteer service right now for a few years, but I still feel just so close to it because of the work that we do with FitFighter and our support for service members.
Well, it's funny you said that from the military, you missed the trash talk and the grind. So I can imagine that going into the fire department gives you a bit of that back. Mm-hmm. I have some close friends who did that, in Boston, and even here in the FDNY, who came out of the Navy, came out of the Army, and they've all spoken to getting that back and how that has grounded them as they've searched for solace. And while we're sitting here, and people don't see because it's behind the camera or behind the audio, but our marketing coordinator, Jenny Duclay, her family started an organization called Sailhead. That's actually how we met a long time ago. And Sailhead is here on Long Island. They're out of Huntington. And that is an organization that teaches veterans how to sail. And my path coming to New York, similar to you when you got out, was I was searching for that thing that was going to ground me, that was going to help me. And we're going to do an episode with Sailhead later on this summer. But
very cool.
I found them and was able to find a way to build a team, create something amongst a kind of disparate group of people who had some loose interest in sailing, and then be able to go out and find this new band or group. And so I can identify with a lot of what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's been really great.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
You said in an interview that you did that you were looking forward to writing your book about your entrepreneurial journey because you have a lot of advice. We talked about getting out of the military, going to Dartmouth. You spent some time, you told me, as a ski bum in Switzerland. And after my interview with Stephen Nyman, who is a 3-time World Cup champion and multiple-time Olympian, I am very jealous of the ski bum life. I always wanted to do it. He asked me why I didn't become a lifty, and I'm like, I don't know if you just insulted me or not, but I would love to be a lifty.
Yeah.
But then you worked at Warby Parker. You were there for 4.5 years. And then you decided that I'm going to take this entrepreneurial journey. We've talked about the company. We've gone into that. But you said the ups and downs. You called it a roller coaster. And it's been 7 years of this and now full time for the better part of the last 2.5 or 3 years. What do you think about the decision that you had to make? I'm here, I'm working for someone, this is a major company, things are going well. You told me when we spoke a couple of weeks ago that you left Warby Parker at the worst time, an 18-month-old child, and here you are saying, I've got to pursue my vision, pursue my dream. Can you tell me a bit about that decision and the big differences that you felt between waking up every day and going to work for someone versus waking up every day and pursuing your path? Because Julia Samrasova and I in a previous episode joked that being an entrepreneur is the loneliest place that you can be.
Yeah. Yeah, then that's a whole among the topics, the entrepreneurial topics, it's a whole topic and it relates to what I try to do every day, which I know something we'll talk about later. But I am a real believer in the idea that people have very specific and unique and individualized gifts that are what drive us and sort of make us up as people, that ultimately that there is, in people these very unique qualities. And I think that, one of them, I think for some people more than others, is this like sort of dogged curiosity, and that leads to this like intrinsic passion and motivation. And I had found something, I'd sort of stumbled upon something, and it's funny because someone told me once, like, don't say it like that, Sarah, like use the word stumbled, because then people think it's random. And I'm like, well, okay, That's fine. If I like in
I
a polished
journeyed
setting,
upon it.
Like I'm like in a polished setting of like the bottom line is like this wasn't this sort of like deliberate. I mean, of course, everything I do is deliberate in terms of like thinking through problems, but definitely was something where it was a very circuitous road towards initially this garage hobby that became something so passionate for me. But one of the things that I do feel is one of my unique gifts is this curiosity. Like one of the things that I try to do every day is, which is a spoiler alert for later, because I know we'll probably talk about that, is to have moments of curiosity that you like almost take to like a stubborn nth degree, right? Like learn something about something that's random, or ask two follow-up questions when you thought you were completely out of questions or ideas or whatever it is. And I mean, that's the story of FitFighter, because we never would have landed on things like this perfect S170 steel shot, with this compaction inside this fire hose. We never would have landed on getting to the point where we were talking about, to the sailing canvas shop about, pounding grommets in the end. If we weren't just continuing to have this like really like passionate curiosity. And I think that is, when I think about, I know that about myself, and when I was thinking about the opportunity I felt like that existed for real, genuine impact and like leveraging that unique skill set you have, to do good. That was really the thing that felt so compelling, that like I'm being called, it was almost this like divine. I mean, I'm not a very religious person. I'm like a spiritual person. I believe things happen for a reason. But I was like feeling really called to taking this chance, this like leap of faith, to leave something that I was, pretty good at, and like doing really well. I mean, I helped Warby grow from, the ground up, their bricks and mortar portfolio, to over, $100 million company, in retail and 55 stores and this amazing journey. But I had a pivot point in my life that I think is really important for us to be like deliberately thinking about, which is I was 5 years down the road. Warby had grown tremendously, was now, becoming sort of a big corporation, which ultimately, as September 29th last year went public, 10 years later. And I was feeling that like calling, and then also that I was getting less and less exceptional at the job I was doing at Warby. And that was also like pretty scary, because it was like, yeah, maybe I could have like muscled through, to kind of keep, to grow into the next level there, which was to be much more of, in the corporate side of things. Right now I was like leading this big team, and we had this huge budget and all these stores. And what I was really good at the beginning was that passionate curiosity that led me to be great at like building teams and helping to refine what the bricks and mortar retail model was at Warby, and even like manage designers and like problem solve. And so what made me really good there is what I felt also was driving me towards, being an entrepreneur and launching my own thing. And I think those decision points and pivot points are different for everyone, depending on what career choices you make and what your skill set is and what those intrinsic qualities are. But I do believe that everybody has those and can create those and have those moments where they really like elevate the moment and do question like if there's a decision to be made and had. And I think we should do more of that. And as we like mentor, also now younger, folks coming along, veterans coming out of the military, those things are things I like to sort of like share with people, those stories, and say like, what's your version of that story? Like let's think about kind of those pivot points that can allow you and give you like the agency and give yourself the confidence to think about something that could be and give it a try, success or fail.
And the best part about entrepreneurism is success or fail, either way, it's your fault.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You don't get to hide.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you're right. It's on you.
You talked about giving back, and as you look forward into what's next with FitFighter, a big part of what you're focused on is a bit of philanthropy. You have a partnership with Tunnel to Towers. Can you talk about that partnership, the importance of giving back to the community of first responders and veterans for the company?
Yeah, when I was thinking about how I wanted to mirror the mission-driven company that I had, learned a lot about at Tuck and then at Warby, and this idea that we can leverage for-profit business to do good in the world and support great nonprofit initiatives. I was looking for an organization that would be representative of our roots at FitFighter. Tunnel to Towers is absolutely, hands down, the most extraordinary and impactful organization in this country supporting service members on the public safety side and military veterans. They're just bar none. Like, I'll stand it up against any other company, organization. Not that any of those aren't doing great work, but just from the standpoint of having been focused and efficient, with great core programs that are very simple and straightforward. 95% of funds funnel from your hands directly into those programs. It's the single most efficient organization in the country, foundation, doing this kind of work. And so it felt like this was just a no-brainer. I loved, they had a great story too, being inspired by Steven Siller. His brother, now Frank, runs the foundation, and his siblings all, in support of him. And so just, this sort of outgrowth after, out of 9/11, and then the work they decided to do both on the public safety side and on the military side, I just thought, man, like, it's almost as if this organization was built to be my charitable partner. It was just a perfect fit. And so I'm really keen on, obviously we're still really small, and so our contribution is still fairly modest to T2T, but I've structured that so that they're also just a very important and intimately related partner for me. We're putting on a huge event in San Antonio, March 19th. FitFighter's first ever event that we've sponsored and run ourselves, outside of sort of participating in other events. And it's going to be, Military Town, USA, and it's going to be in benefit of T2T. And so they just, it's a perfect fit and alignment. And I'd encourage, any entrepreneur, founder, to think about that alignment, that sort of bigger esoteric mission. Obviously, our market now is no longer just public safety. I mean, we're in the fitness industry, and so we serve demographics, far beyond those roots. But in terms of finding something that really ultimately is a very important part of the brand and mission, T2T, I just couldn't think of a better fit.
Sarah, as we close out, the Jedburghs had to do 3 things every day as core foundational tasks to be successful in their world, what I call be successful. They had to be able to shoot, they had to be able to move, they had to be able to communicate. If they did these 3 core tasks with the utmost precision, then their energy and their focus could actually be on other things, more challenging, complex things that came their way, like defeating the Germans. Mm-hmm. When you think about your day and you think about the drivers of your success, what are the 3 things that you do as foundational core tasks every day to be successful in your world?
Yeah, so these 3, this feels like really like, oh man, like, don't screw this one up,
This is the test question.
Yeah, exactly. So I already mentioned one, and then one I'm going to share with the Jedburghs, but in my own way, and then one will be follow on. So the first one I already mentioned is to create moments of curiosity. I think that it's easy for us to go through day to day and not think of each day as being consequential, in the big picture. And we don't need to think of each day as needing to be epic. But I do think one of the things that can set any day apart is that we create moments of curiosity where we can ask a question about something that we don't know about, or learn something new, or surprise someone with an interest in them or something that's interesting to them. And so I think moments of curiosity is something that is very foundational for me. The second one is the moving point. And I also believe, as you know, and we're about to do some movement, moving is really, that's my North Star for people with FitFighter, is that I'm arming them to move better and to move at all, and to think about movement as something that should be just inherently a part of our day, like woven in and out of our day. Not that, movement has become something in fitness that is like this 40-minute squeeze it in stint where then we take a shower and sit down again. And like that is like societally damaging and dangerous, and we're there. And so moving is I will share with the Jedburghs, they probably meant it in a slightly different way, but like just, that moving being, whether it's like at a stand-up desk or checking your posture or having a quick movement session, dancing with your kids, whatever that means to you, like just having that be something that's like your North Star. And then, the third thing that I would say is talking with at least one family member and at least one friend in your village. And I always talk about a village, and you've heard me in other settings probably talk about the village. I believe that people have 12 to 15 people in their life that are truly in their village. Those people who are like, call you at 2 a.m. kind of people. They know everything about you. You can lean on them. You always think about them. And then there's like everybody else. And so calling one of those people and calling a family member is something that I try to do every single day so that we remember what's really important.
3 of the best we've had. Absolutely. Create moments of curiosity, movement as a part of our day, and call and speak with one family member or someone in your village. I love all 3 of those. We spoke briefly a few minutes ago about the 9 characteristics of performance as defined by Special Operations Forces: drive, resiliency, adaptability, humility, integrity, curiosity, team ability, effective intelligence, and emotional strength. We say that elite performers demonstrate all 9 of these, never at one time, but based on the situation that they're in, there's a combination of these. Great organizations can take these 9 and they can figure out what balance of which ones they want in their talent. But in order to build great teams and great individuals and organizations, all 9 have to be present in some way. I say that, and then at the end of these, I take one and I give it to the guest, and I say, when I think about our conversation, this is the one that I think you exemplify. Mm-hmm. You spoke a lot about curiosity. Mm-hmm. I do believe that when I think about you, when I think about FitFighter, when I think about your journey, it is about curiosity. And you called something that I wrote down here because I think it's so important, I'm going to repeat it, but a dogged curiosity that brings you to intrinsic motivation. Because curiosity ties with drive, the first one on that list, and a lot of times they're hand in hand. Because if you're not curious, then you're not going to get up out of bed to go find a solution. And so these things kind of work together, and the higher drive you have, as you talked about, to find a solution, iterate on the product, make it better, be better today than you were yesterday, even in small doses, because you said every day doesn't have to be epic, and I really like that. Mm-hmm. It's so important, it's so fitting. It ties so much to the entrepreneurial spirit. It's what's made this company. It's what will continue to define this company. Thank you for hosting us here. It has been such a pleasure to talk with you. I look forward to seeing this company grow. I look forward to further partnership with you, and in any way that we can support your efforts, we're here to do that. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, and thank you so much. This has been a very special conversation for me too.
American Jedburghs went on to form the foundation of the United States Special Forces and the Special Activities Directorate of the Central Intelligence Agency. Thanks for listening to the Jedburg Podcast. I'm your creator and host, Fran Racioppi. Join us next week for a new episode on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on YouTube for full episodes, highlights, and other behind-the-scenes content. If you like what you heard, give us a like and leave a review. Follow me, Fran Racioppi, Talent War Group, and our sponsor Jersey Mike Subs on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Send your comments and inquiries to media@talentwargroup.com. As former members of Special Operations Forces, the Jedburg Podcast and Talent War Group contribute a percentage of all profits to Special Operations Warrior Foundation, supporting the families of our fallen warriors. Thanks for joining us on this episode. How you prepare today determines success tomorrow.